Well, we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Xuan Truong. I am going to be your moderator for this new and awesome meetup group called Access CLT. And I'm going to just go ahead and give my image description. I am an Asian American wheelchair user, female with medium to long black hair, and I use she, her pronouns. And we are going to jump into some housekeeping. Hold on. There we go. And I'm going to turn it over to Michele.
Awesome. So Kimberly, we are ready. If that wasn't, I'm sure you are. So if you need captions in Zoom, we have the option at the bottom. You'll see a CC button to toggle that on and off. There is also a view full transcript available in Zoom as well. However, particularly if you want to see the full transcript, we have a QR code and then also a stream text link, which I'm putting in the chat right now, that you can use to open up a transcript in a separate window to see the captions alongside the video. So please utilize that if needed. Thank you.
Awesome. So to start off, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, give a brief image description, and tell us the organization that they are affiliated with. So I'm going to start off with Samantha.
Hi there. Thank you, Xuan. My name is Samantha Nevins, and I am the Executive Director of Disability Rights and Resources, a 501c3 nonprofit in the Charlotte area. And my pronouns are she, her. And a visual description of me is I am a Caucasian woman in my 40s. I have red shoulder length hair. It is straight today. I am sitting with a virtual background behind me that says Disability Rights and Resources and has our logo. And I am in a like olive green floral dress with kind of coral lipstick on. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Samantha. And then next we have Anessa.
Hi, everyone. Anessa Powell. So delighted to be here with you all. I'm founder and CEO of AllAbility Recruiting. We specialize in what I like to say, all things disability employment related with regards to recruitment, job placements, as well as training and consulting. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with blonde hair, and it's curly today. Decided to just change things up today. And I'm wearing a white shirt with a lavender jacket. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And then last but not least, Michele.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Michele Williams, and I actually co-lead Access CLT. So I'm doubly excited to be here because this is our debut event, and thank you to our other panelists for being here as well. I am an independent accessibility consultant. So my company is M.A.W. Consulting LLC, making accessibility work. And my consulting is primarily digital accessibility and ensuring that there are no barriers in our digital spaces. And I am an African-American woman with natural big curly hair. And I'm sitting in my office, which features a lot of accessibility and disability books behind me, including the late Judy Heumann, who is considered the grandmother of sorts of the ADA celebration that we're doing today. So this is so fitting and so happy to be talking about this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists, for the introductions. And if you have any questions during our conversation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will monitor the chat and take questions as they come. So to introduce everyone, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which turns 33 this week, is one of the most groundbreaking legislation for disabled people in America. So today we'll be hosting a conversation on the history of this legislation, the impact it has, and where it can be improved. So to start off, I'm going to turn this first question over to Samantha. And I'm going to ask, what is Disability Rights and Resources, and what are the aims of this organization?
Okay, thank you, Xuan, and hello to everyone out there. Disability Rights and Resources, as I mentioned in the introduction, is a local 501c3 nonprofit, and we are what is called a Center for Independent Living, or a CIL. And if you're not familiar with a CIL, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what sets apart a CIL from other disability-related nonprofits. So there are 5 main things that make a Center for Independent Living a Center for Independent Living. 1, we are federally mandated. So we are one of 7 centers for independent living in North Carolina. We are one of the first 8 centers for independent living that were birthed out of the Rehab Act back in the 70s. And so as a Center for Independent Living, our goal is to promote independence. But the way we promote independence and the independent living philosophy is we do 4 key things, such as we are consumer controlled, which means that people with disabilities run and work and are consumers of our center and our services. So I myself am someone who identifies as having a hidden disability, actually 2 hidden disabilities. And so 51% of my board and my staff are persons with disabilities. And these disabilities could be a variety of disabilities, which leads me to the next thing that sets us apart as an agency is that we are cross disabilities. So we serve any and all disabilities, everything from hidden disabilities, mental health disabilities, obvious physical disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and so the cognitive disabilities. So the way that we approach the work that we do, in addition to being consumer controlled, we don't verify disability. So people self-disclose when they call our agency. And if they have a disability, doesn't matter the kind of disability or the age they are, we are available to assist them in their independent living goals. We also are unique in that we believe in peer mentoring. So we believe in that lived experience that people with disabilities should be helping other individuals with disabilities problem solve and break down barriers to their independent living goals. And lastly, we are community-based. This always comes up despite our name, a Center for Independent Living. We're not a rehabilitation center. We are not residential. We are embedded in the community and rely on many, many years of community partnerships and stakeholders to achieve the work that we do and the collaboration that we have. So that's a little bit about our agency. So real happy to be here because we speak ADA and it is one of the cornerstones of why we exist and how we do what we do.
Thank you, Samantha. And then Anessa, what is AllAbility recruiting and what does it aim to do? And if you could tell us a little bit about the origin of your company.
Sure, happy to do so. So we are a relatively new firm. We just celebrated our 2-year anniversary last month. So it is born out of a pure passion of mine as someone who lives with a non-apparent disability. I was diagnosed almost 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago now, with a rare autoimmune condition called Addison's disease. And my life was forever changed upon diagnosis. And I was quite consumed in understanding what this new life would look like for me, and quickly learned that I had qualities to give for companies, but I just didn't know what that was going to look like for me working full time. So fast forward many years later, pandemic hits, changes everything for our family. And we were really trying to figure out what our next step was going to be. I was actually working with a disability recruiter. My husband, who had been in corporate America for over 20 years, was working with a recruiter. And we really were not wowed by our experiences. And it was very much a lightning bolt moment of saying, we can do this. We can do this for the disability community. We can do this keeping in mind that there are so many wonderful talents out there and that companies, organizations, businesses should be hiring those with wonderful talent who just happen to have a disability. So when we launched, we initially began with recruiting only, which was with job placements with candidates. And we have candidates from all over the country that reach out to us saying, hey, can you help me find an employment? And we are just so excited by our talent pool, which is it's growing exponentially every day. And then we have companies that we work with that say, can you help us fill these jobs? We want to be committed and inclusive with the disability community. So we have two sides with that, our candidates and our clients. And we quickly learned after launching that businesses want to do the right thing. They just don't oftentimes know where to begin, especially when it comes to working with those with disability. They get very frightened when you say words and they're afraid they're going to say something wrong, do something wrong. Hence why the ADA and how we help them with that. So we launched our training piece where we walk HR teams, all teams actually of all sorts through that process and understanding disabilities and what that means and why it matters for their business and why it should matter, because you have 25% of the population that either work for you or you support for your customers and how to better support that. We had the training sessions and then our clients would go through that and they would say to us, that was great, but what's next? And so we offer consulting now where we really have a chance to get our arms around the whole employee life cycle and making sure things are accessible, which is why I work with Michele and helping me make sure that happens. And, you know, from the technology side, from the application through the interviewing, and making sure, do you understand how to interview someone who is neurodivergent? Do you know how to interview someone who is deaf, blind, so you name it, and going through that whole gamut. So we kind of are like that, what we like to say, that one-stop shop. It's very personal for us. As I mentioned, for me, we believe in our candidates as people. They have qualities to bring. They are not a number to us. And we just love being a part here in the city of Charlotte. It's such a wonderful city. There's such excitement, I think, especially considering what we're doing today, but just in general, the buzz about really the community understanding that we are the right size city. We are a wonderful size city in a sense of with regards to businesses and the people in the community around it, how we can just take it one step further to support all of those that are quarter of the population living with a disability. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And last up, Michele, what is your role as an accessibility consultant and what is this digital accessibility and why is that important?
Awesome. So first of all, I'm just learning and gleaming so much from the panel. So my pillar in disability inclusion is in what has become essential. Like, look at what we're doing now. We're literally in all these different locations using technology to connect. So I do digital accessibility consulting because when people are learning how to design and code and produce digital technology, they don't always learn to do that thinking about disability. So we understand that disability is often invisible, often not necessarily included in our considerations, and that needs to be included in how we design and code in order to reduce barriers, just like they need to be included in how you would build a building and making sure that everyone can enter and navigate that building. So I come in and help people understand what those guidelines and standards are, and also some of the more creative ways that don't yet have standards because we know technology moves very swiftly. So sometimes there needs to just be, again, that understanding of disability considerations so that we are creating technology and allowing technology to do what it can do, which is bring everyone together, equalize opportunities, open up employment, open up opportunities for independent living, all of these other things that technology should be able to do, so long as we are not doing it in ways that create those barriers.
Thank you, Michele. And I'm going to open up the next question to all the panelists. And the question is, in what ways have you seen the Americans with Disabilities Act impact the nation, the state, and local communities? And I can read that question again if needed. Anessa.
Yes. I will be happy to go first. So my goodness, you know, it changed everything when it was passed, truly. It changed it for just even, at that playing field, as I like to say, making sure it's even for all and starting that way. And I always like to tell our clients and people that I speak with that that's just the beginning, it's the baseline. And I think we're going to touch on this in a little bit. We still have so much more to do, but it was such a groundbreaking, to your point, a groundbreaking piece of legislation to make sure that, we're just starting and this is where we're beginning. And the unfortunate thing is that when companies understand ADA, they really don't get into the depths of it. And unfortunately, that's where the lawsuits start coming in. And I see this time and time again with our clients and our candidates when it comes to accommodations not being met, but that's definitely a topic for another day. But I would say that we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And it's a guideline, but you can take it so much further, whether it be within your community, within your organization, even within your employees that you work around. And it's a guiding point and to continue carrying it on further.
Yeah, I'll jump in. It's, it feels like words understate its impact. I am not someone who identifies as having a disability, and I'm also someone who grew up basically their whole life with the ADA in place. Mm-hmm. So it is unimaginable to think that there was a time this wasn't in place, that disabled folks weren't just in our space, in our schools, in our stores, but I can envision that there was such a time. But I also recognize that while laws are supremely important, it doesn't necessarily change hearts and minds. So I think that we are at a point at which the law is vital to have. I can only imagine or read about or ingest these struggles, the work that went into not only the ADA, but all of the other legislation that led up to it, and all of the advocacy that was needed to even get to this point. But now I feel like we're 33 years, and yet it doesn't feel like that law has done hasn't reached its potential yet. So I feel obligated in many ways to honor the work that was put in to get to this point and continue to advocate for doing what the essence of it, right? The essence of it was understanding disability as equal, as just part of the diversity of the human experience. That's where my mindset is these days, not just this is charitable work, or this is if I have time work, or if I feel up to it work. No, this is basic human work that everyone has a part in. And I feel obligated to carry that message on behalf of those who did the hard work of getting something like this even in place.
And Michele and Anessa, I will just echo, of course, in support of the things you've just said. But I think what always comes to mind is it literally became first physically, can they get in the brick and mortar, the spaces? Can they cross the street? They being persons with disabilities. And so what we now, as you mentioned, it's been around, you've been around for as long as this law has been in place, but there were many years and times before that where individuals couldn't even get in the door, let alone get hired, achieve the same educational level. And so it is not lost on certainly all of us, but as an agency where we breathe this and we fight for independence and we advance independence and we promote self-advocacy, we work on systems advocacy. This is a civil rights law. And so it's important that we remember the piece that making sure that there were people who fought for this. And we often take that for granted. But now it is we always say it's a floor, not a ceiling. And 33 years is a very long time to have it had much more of the ADA enforced, but that there is still so much work to be done. And so I'm in the company of such wonderful people today who I know will continue to fight for these things. And it's just the ADA leveled the playing field, but there's still so much work to be done. And if all you're looking to do is meet the bare minimum requirements of the ADA, then you're not doing your job as a disability rights advocate or as a self-advocate. And so it's just important that on the anniversary of this big law, that it took work and time and just using your voice. And nothing about us without us is what we always say. I can't stress that enough. It's the voices that got louder and louder that keep the ADA growing and learning. And until it is enforced, I think we're never going to be where we want to be. So
Amazing. So many people think that signing of the ADA, that disability inclusion has been solved. Do you agree with this? If not, why?
I'll jump in. I don't agree that we have achieved full inclusion. I think we had an opportunity for a step in the right direction, and we've been headed in the direction, but we have not achieved full inclusion on so many levels. And I think our work is still, and the torch that we carry is still necessary. I do want to speak from the place as someone who has an accommodation in a workplace, who had an accommodation in school. I think we've gotten better. And I certainly think that companies, for-profit, nonprofit schools are doing a little bit of work with DEI in spaces, but until they fully recognize disabilities as part of diversity, a part of an essential piece of inclusion, we're not there yet. So I'm gonna knock it on my soapbox and give space to the rest of the panelists this morning, but
I'll get on my soapbox. How about that? Yeah, we have so much to do. Can I just say that? Where, like to your point, it's the floor, not the ceiling, and we've got to keep pushing. And especially when it comes to people understanding with working within employees and hiring and what that looks like. There's a reason why only 4% of people who, when they apply for jobs, disclose their disability. 4%. So you're looking at, if 25% of the population has one and they're not sharing it, there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. There's a reason, because you haven't created the culture within your company. You're not talking about it. Yes, you're committed to DEI. Yes, you're talking about, you're committed to hiring people with color and sexual orientation. Yes, bravo, but you're missing it if you don't talk about disability. The beauty of disability is it's intersectional. Yeah. So you can touch all of those other groups as well, all the while promoting that within your organization. So yes, they're not going to talk about it because they're afraid of the stigma that goes along with disclosing. They're afraid they're not going to get hired. They're afraid they're going to be overlooked for a promotion because they've told you that they need this new accommodation. So where we are, we have so much to do. And it starts with conversations like this and really pushing that needle forward and driving that, because if more and more of us are talking about it and saying out loud, hey, I own my own business and I have a disability and it can be done. Yes, that's something we must be sharing. And, the ADA, the wonderful part about it is they left it broad enough to add things. So if you look, for instance, long COVID was recently added because now that is a covered protection under the ADA. Bravo for that. So it can be changed. There can be things to be added, and there can be ways in which we can be very mindful of it. Getting off my soapbox, I'm turning it over to Michele.
Honey, this is what we put you all on the panel to do. If you all didn't bring all of this, there was no point to this panel event. Yeah. So I'm going to actually somewhat address your question, Xuan, but pivot just a little bit to make a point specific to digital accessibility, which is to break some bad news to some folks that the ADA actually does not cover digital accessibility fully in the law. So when you have people say that they have an ADA compliant website, there is no such thing. What the ADA has successfully been used to do is to try to make the case that it should cover digital accessibility because of the what we call pervasiveness of technology, meaning you pretty much can't do anything without technology these days. So you therefore can't discriminate based on disability. But technically, I'm going to put in the chat a recent blog post from Lainey Feingold, who is a legal person or legal mind in this space, someone who dedicates herself to cases around digital inclusion. I believe I put the right chat, so on the right blog, but there is not yet officially language in ADA, because if we think about when that happened, 1990, there was this tech thing happening, but not to the point where it could be put into the law yet. You know, we think about personal computing having its big debut in, say, Windows 95, for instance, right? So there was this parallel thing happening. So it's not yet explicitly in there. And that then becomes a detriment to being able to use the law in ways that it has been used in other spaces, such as employment and in, say, housing or other transportation, et cetera. We're not always able to use it in tech, and we desperately need to, because again, technology is now our life. So again, when we say the passing of the ADA solved for disability inclusion, it doesn't currently, even in its current state, because it's missing this vital piece. And we really have to continue advocating for ensuring the law's wording can cover our space, particularly because we're not just talking mobile, which was already amazing, and personal computing. We're now moving into VR, AR, all the autonomous vehicles. You know, the idea of a self-driving car can absolutely change the landscape for disabled people if the vehicle can accommodate a disabled person, right? So there is a lot to the language of laws, making sure that they can address what's happening in society. But again, we wouldn't need to define civil rights if people knew how to be civil. So if we could get people to, again, see humans as humans, we wouldn't need this sort of stick of the law. But since we do, that law needs to then address key aspects of our society.
Samantha, I see that you're unmuted. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to give props and snaps to what Michele was saying, because often, you know, we promote self-advocacy and we can kind of handle it on both sides. We can work with the businesses to make sure there is accessibility, especially, you know, in the digital world. But if, let's say, they're not amenable to compliance, we are an advocacy-based organization, and we can lift up and really support the person to use their own voice and become their own self-advocate, and you know, file the necessary discrimination, take the steps to file for discrimination. So it spoke to me what Michele was saying about their side, because it's rapidly changing, and you're very correct about the ADA doesn't, even with WCAG, it's just it doesn't quite cut it.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Michele, for bringing up digital accessibility. I want to open up the floor for anyone who has a question. If you could leave it in the chat, or maybe raise your hands. We have one last question for all the panelists, and I kind of want to open up the floor for open discussion afterwards. So while just be thinking about questions you might have. And the last question for everyone is, how can non-disabled people, or what can non-disabled people do to improve accessibility and be allies or even accomplices for the work that you do? And how can people be more involved?
I'll jump in. Okay, so much. So if you are with a company organization, talk about it. Talk about disability inclusion, talk about why it matters for your company, why it matters for your customers. You can better support your community if you are a disability ally. If you are with a larger organization and you don't have an employee resource group, start one. That is vital for helping to drive change within an organization, is just talking about it as a community and bringing together. And I'm not just talking about those that have disabilities, I'm talking about those that are allies, but also caregivers. I feel like that's often an overlooked group, especially within larger communities and organizations that, there's a lot of us out there who are caregiving for those with disabilities in our day-to-day lives. And that's such a vital piece that needs to be honored. So, speak about it. Don't be afraid to bring it up. When people are saying, or your organization is saying, we're committed to DEI, and you're like, where's the disability portion? Just start asking those questions, because that is just vital and what it looks like. And also having the conversations. If you manage a team, or if you work for a team and you are not asking how you can better support one another, is there anything that I can do so people do feel comfortable in disclosing? And once you start creating that culture, everything changes, right? The culture can't be from the bottom going up, and it can't be from the top down. It has to come from the inside out. You have to start talking about it and having those conversations. Now is a fantastic time. It is Disability Pride Month. It's July. It's phenomenal. It's exciting, but don't let that conversation end on August 1st. And also, when it gets to October, it's National Disability Employment Awareness Month. My calendar is always packed that entire month with speaking. I wish it was packed the whole year, because people stop talking about it November 1st. So just continue to create driving those conversations, and that's how change starts to happen.
If I could go next, Xuan, I think the best way to be a disability ally, in addition to what Anessa said, is representation matters. Ask the people with the disabilities and a variety of persons with disabilities how they feel about the workplace culture. Again, can't stress it enough. Nothing about us without us. Representation matters. Don't assume if you've met one person using a power chair that they speak for all the individuals using power chairs, or one person with a hidden disability. You've really met one person who uses a power chair, or one person with a hidden disability. And so their lived experiences are going to be very different. And I really loved what Anessa said about, creating the culture. I think normalizing conversations about accommodations, about disability, using the proper language matters. And I think getting rid of that ableist vocabulary, and that has to be embedded in the workplace culture. So those are just a few that come to the top of my head right now. But it has to come, it has to be a holistic approach to really shifting the tide and changing the culture. So how to be a disability ally: ask, read, seek out disability content creators, other personnel, people, and ask them what they want. Because you're going to find that there are many more people who just haven't talked about it yet, or didn't have a safe space. So creating that safe space to have the hard discussions, and that's it.
Are you sure? Because I felt like there was more you had. Are you sure?
I'm sure for now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for now. Okay. Shucks, you all just, woo. Okay, so I'm going to try and piggyback. Let me see. So I was going to say, talk about it. Yes. Learn the word ableism. So Samantha just said ableist terms, but to go back a step, learn what that is and what that means, because you are going to encounter that when you try to advocate for disabilities. So at the basic level, ableism is a viewpoint that non-disabled bodies are, say, superior, preferred, and therefore disability makes you lesser than. And so that viewpoint starts to permeate through our society, which is why people need to, say, advocate for equal human rights, because they are not seen as equal humans. That is ableism, just like racism, ageism, etc. Learning that will then help you to understand when you get pushback, when you try to advocate for this. And this is why our group Access CLT is mindful of the word accomplice and not just ally, because at some point, you're going to have to shift the dynamic of what is the status quo in order to get this done. As we talked about during a lot of 2020, when we talked about changing systems, some systems are working as designed when it comes to, say, race or gender. Some systems are working as designed when it comes to disability as well. So you coming in and trying to include disability more prominently, more equally in these spaces is shifting a system that did not want that in place, sometimes intentionally. So an accomplice is someone who is therefore going to disrupt that, and you have to be ready for, sometimes I call myself as a non-disabled person a flame catcher, because there may need to be discriminatory viewpoints caught by us first in order to then open up a safe space for a disabled person. I have literally been on calls where people didn't even realize they were on the phone with a disabled person and had all manner of derogatory things and discriminatory things to say. So you need to be prepared, I think, also, as particularly as a non-disabled person who may not experience this day to day like someone who is disabled does. Be ready to be in spaces where there was no intent to include a disabled person. And that is why they have not set things up the way they need to set them up to be inclusive. Xuan, did you want to read out EJ's comment?
Yes.
Okay.
So EJ said, just to support what Michele is saying, you are also going to do ableist things sometimes, even while working towards liberating disabled people. It is important to understand that and willing to be able to shift and correct and keep showing up. And that is beautiful. Thank you.
May I say one more thing? I think as you know, we start to shift the corporate culture, the workplace culture, you know, in addition to other spaces, I think since it's the anniversary of the ADA coming up tomorrow, I think we need to realize how not just in the office, but the program services, the access to things. I mean, if there's a company party, making sure that it is accessible to all, and making sure that the social events, the team building events, that goes far beyond just what people encounter in their, you know, accommodations when they come into the office or remotely, that it extends, per the ADA, full inclusion extends past just the 8 to 5 work day or the Monday through Friday. So if there's a fundraiser, you know, it's important to create an inclusive fundraiser for your staff that has disabilities. If it's a Christmas party and no one off-site and no one can get in the door, then that's not a place where you need to be having your Christmas party. And so just continuing to have those conversations about how outside of the work day, your company can, or the organization can, continue to make things as inclusive as possible.
And can I just, great, Samantha, that was perfect. Yes, absolutely what you're saying. But if I could just piggyback also what EJ was saying, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I think when you're coming from a place of learning and understanding, I think that is so important, especially in this space. Look, I've been in this space for many years and I am learning every day new words, new ways in which to interact with others. And I always want to come from that space. And I always acknowledge that too. If you are interacting with someone that you're not usually someone that you're interacting with on a normal basis, always ask that person, bring them into the conversation. And especially, like, say, for instance, you have someone that is a coworker that is in a wheelchair, and you're like, would you prefer that I stand and talk to you, or should I sit? Always ask their preference first, and coming from a place of saying, look, I want to learn from you. I want to understand so I can better support you. So I think that is so important, just to always have that conversation and not let it be the elephant in the room, as I like to say. Always bring them into it.
I love that, Anessa, because I think we could probably all go on
Yeah.
and on all day, but I just love it in the way that it just really you know, you ask people. It comes to mind in Disability Pride Month, in that, you know, we've been told person first language, and then now people with disability are, you know, it's a part of their identity. And so if you've lived all your life, you know, it's okay, but you must ask first. And so I really just wanted to throw that in there, because it's something we've been taught, okay, person first, and that's normalized. But I know myself and my staff members, you know, we're okay with disability first language, because
Exactly.
it's, you know, just, I say this in the spirit of Disability Pride Month. So.
And Samantha, do you mind going into what identity first language is for those who aren't familiar?
Yes, of course. So identity first language would be, you put the person first. I'm sorry, person first language, you know, I'm a person who is neurodivergent, as opposed to the disability first, you know, neurodivergent person. So that would be a good example. You know, I have a staff member, and she asked us in her job interview, so which, I should know this, but does your organization use person first or disability first language? And she said, you know, I've lived with my disability all my life. I'm proud to, may I use that instead of person first? And we're like, oh, of course, you know, you do you, and we'll embrace it and accept it. So is that a good enough explanation, Xuan?
Perfect, thank you.
Sure.
And I see Michelle and Anessa, y'all are both unmuted, so I'm gonna.
Yeah,
No?
I forgot my point. Samantha was saying something, and I should have wrote down what I was going to say, but it left me. But I think so much has been covered. It's okay. Yeah.
I was just going to say, in our candidates, every candidate that we have is different in the way in which to identify. So that's why we always want to make sure we ask. And, you know, we have some that are very passionate about it, and there are some that are like, no, I'm not very comfortable in talking about it. So everyone is different. And to Samantha's point earlier, if you've met one person with a disability, you met one person with a disability. We all have our own unique lived experiences, and that's something to keep in mind.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. I am so happy that that panelists, you all have agreed to be on this thing for our first Access CLT debut. At this point, I want to open the floor to the audience. If y'all have any questions, I'm going to give it about 30 awkward seconds. Feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
And meanwhile, you got in the signature y'all when you said that. Very tried and true to the Access CLT brand. Yes.
Right.
Ah, okay.
Ooh, okay.
Maybe we'll hold off on that one since we have something on that coming. Because I did have one point that I did remember, by the way, while we were in the awkward 30-second silence. The only thing I was also going to say, particularly to non-disabled people, don't compartmentalize accessibility either. So the one thread I was hearing, for instance, when Samantha and Anessa were talking, was about how this touches a person's entire life. Like they don't put disability on a shelf, right? Okay, I'm at work, so I'm disabled, but now I'm home, I'm not. So I think sometimes when people are being taught, particularly accessibility, let's say in the digital space or something, they end it in, you know, this, I'm using this application, so this thing needs to be accessible. No. Everything, right? So if you're talking to Samantha's point about an accessible event, the registration form, the access to captions and interpreters, the building itself, or the tool that you're using, how you present, are you describing the key visual information as you're presenting? Like there is a lot to each moment, and then those moments don't stop and start. So the other thing to do as an ally and moving to an accomplice is to be ready to be thinking about accessibility at every moment and every touch point, because it doesn't stop. It impacts a person throughout.
Yes, it does. Well, I think we can wrap up. Before we wrap up, I just want to shout out to all of my CPCC coworkers. There's like a ton of y'all on this call. Thank you for showing up for me. For those of you that don't know, hi Francis. I guess I should have introduced myself. I work at Central Piedmont Community College. I am the career counselor here, and I am in my office today, and we have a question from Tanya. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
I didn't mean to interrupt your flow as I was typing and you were getting ready, you all were getting ready to get off of the call. I did want to kind of miss my question / observation. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you.
No, please,
Tell
please.
us about your stellar background. I'm fairly new to Charlotte and have lived in a number of places on the East Coast, and I've had responsibilities for ADA implementation in the government and in corporate America. And so I'm, along the way, like many people, I was a non-disabled person and became a disabled person with a hidden disability. Just as an anecdote, I remember because I was an executive at the time, and when I was diagnosed, my boss, who was actually the executive vice president for human resources, said, well, do you want to tell anybody? Because it was a hidden disability. And I said, well, what does that say about our company if the person who is responsible for ADA compliance assurance is not able to disclose? So, I very much know it from all kinds of perspectives. But my question, I guess, comes out of my observation and coming here to Charlotte. It is such a boom town in terms of new construction. However, I'm actually quite taken aback by the lack of ramps and elevators in so many buildings, including like new construction. There was a Pilates studio in a building on the second floor, and it's like there was absolutely no consideration, about the fact that there's no elevator, in this building, and I mean a total non-issue. I went to an event in Freedom Park, and I noticed that these ramps had a divot in the middle. What wheelchairs, and first of all, it made it almost impossible for me, even though you can't tell necessarily, but just trying to navigate this divot and going up this hill, making it impossible for anyone a wheelchair or otherwise. So I'm just kind of, quite frankly, appalled that we have all of this new construction going on, and I don't know who's enforcing accessibility in buildings and other areas.
All right, Samantha.
Okay, so Tanya, I would love to have a conversation with you in greater detail and find out exactly, in addition to the places you mentioned, you might already have a list, but I would love to hear from you because our agency does work very closely with both city and county, with the local municipalities and their ADA coordinators, and to make sure that those event spaces are accessible as well as new building. And it does get a little tricky with building code versus ADA, and that's another presentation in itself. However, I would love to have, it sounds like you're a powerful self-advocate, and I would love to have the discussion with you so I can bring it to the attention of, thank you very much for putting that in the chat, so I can bring it to their attention because, you know, they're doing their best, and Charlotte, the city and the county do a great job here, but there's always room for improvement, as we've discussed. And it's the watchers out there and the great disability advocates that can bring some spaces that might not be as apparently accessible to our attention, and we can have those hard conversations with, and those ongoing conversations with the city and the county. Thank you. I look forward to talking with you.
Yes, I think that would be most helpful. I guess that my concern, and just in looking at processes and compliance standards, I don't see, you know, it's kind of like you're coming in after the fact, and there's not this, there's not sufficient oversight in the planning process or an acknowledgement from the developers. I mean, this is just me looking on the from the outside, and this is, you know, anecdotal, you know, as well. So I guess my, you know, it's like there's a lack of integration and acknowledgement about just what this means, and that, you know, I also know, like, there, like, some apartment complexes don't even have elevators, you know, more than one story. You know, it just seems unclear to me about what the requirements are and whether or not developers truly understand, and businesses, quite frankly, because it's, you know, how could that business put a Pilates studio on the second floor of a building with no elevator? I mean, who could even conceive of that, you know? So I guess it's not in any way a knock against your work or your oversight. It's just, I don't understand how this could even be, I guess, is my point.
Yes, Tanya, thank you so much for bringing that up. And that is, as someone with a physical disability, that is very frustrating to see a quote unquote like newer city not having accessibility in mind. So we are going to wrap up since we are coming up on time. So this is a list of our speakers. I am going to put our personal Access CLT's email in the chat. Michelle, I hope I got that one right. Cool.
You did, and I also put in the chat, all the information you see on this slide is in the chat, and we will put that slide on our meetup groups, in the photos of our meetup group as well, but it's also in the chat in text form, all of our contact info and websites as applicable.
All right, so we are planning to meet a couple of times, like maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So for our next event, we are going to team up with Samantha and Disability Rights and Resources for our first physical meetup. So we're gonna have a couple of virtual and a couple of in-person just to change things up. So join us on September 16th, bright and early on a Saturday, for an accessible art walk. Please register for this one because space is limited. And in the meantime, please stay in touch, give us some feedback. And thank you so much for joining us.